Okay, well that segues nicely, as we say at the business, into this whole dynamic question of what is needed in terms of interdisciplinary approaches to this science. Is that what we need, much more breaking down of barriers between the social sciences and the life sciences? And if so, what habits have to change? I know, Orem, I think you may have a view on this.
Absolutely. First of all, I think that we're going to have to move beyond some of the reductionist practices that we have, for understandable reasons, pursued. That is where we set a lot of things aside by assumption and try to do very rigorous things on the remaining factors. Intellectually, that's understandable, but in terms of dealing with the world's problems, it doesn't work. Secondly, I think that we really all need to think in terms of complex and dynamic systems where typical behavior involves nonlinearity, abrupt change, irreversible changes, and so on, and to understand that action will always, in situations of that kind, involve high levels of uncertainty, but nonetheless we may be able to contribute to understanding in some general way the character of these systems. And that is the kind of work I think we need to be putting more focus on.
Roger, you seem to be suggesting there isn't enough time to even do that. Is that still your view?
Just to take up that, and then I'll try to answer that question, that I think what's happening in the social sciences now, I was actually one of the authors of the report that Jim referred to about the 3% of funding. The story is actually very interesting, and that report is just an artifact, generally, we were one of a series of committees, all of whom have said the same thing, basically, over the last 10 years in the United States, that the most, as John Schellenhuber said this morning, the most important, most difficult issues lie in the area of the human domains of knowledge, and we know the least about them. And we maybe need 90% of our work there. And we get 3% of the funding to take one particular case going on in the United States. And actually that story is replicated, I don't know how many different committees I've been on that basically have found the same thing when we look at governmental programs. So we have, I think, a long way to go. I think it's nice to see 1,200 people here, but my analysis is that the social science community at the present time is well too small to do the job that we're being asked to do. I think changing the size of that community in the United States, I'll add to it that we have a federal government in which if you look for a social scientist in any agency personnel through the federal government, beyond a handful of economists, you're not going to find them. And so there's a fairly fundamental problem. When they go out there for social science work, there's nobody actually in the agency has any idea what good work looks like or who might do it.
Okay,
and,
sorry to interrupt.
So I'm just going to say that rebuilding that is, and doing it in a time frame, we need to be delivering a more integrated knowledge today. And how are we going to do that, given this situation of the disparity in what is needed in resources and the demand for the knowledge that exists?
Jim, how are we going to do that? Or respond to that, but also please, especially to the non-specialist audience, how are we going to deliver the type of research that you're talking about there?
Well, that's one of the reasons I find myself being very, very passionate about it, particularly because I think we will have to rely on the next generation of researchers, the next generation of knowledge producers to be far better integrators than we have been. Now, and I don't know that we have the time. One way to get so the last 20 years, even while it's been less than 3% for the human dimensions, in real dollars, U.S. funding for climate has gone up. In particular, the last 8 years has gone up. Now, one way to get more dollars is maybe the social science community needs to invent a need for satellites and hardware and big computers and machinery that we can put our big corporations to business. I think that one of the problems that we face with that is that we don't need that. Now, but I think to the point on the policy link, get back to that policy link, here's a challenge because yes, the policy community, and in fact the community worried about climate as a whole, is looking to social scientists and economists for the answers. It's up to our community to come up with these answers. And yet, we all know that real solutions are absolutely contextual. It's the context of the place and the moment of that situation. And so when we are looking for reproducible sort of social science results that then are being asked to come up with the solutions, back to Nicole's point, it is about context. And it makes it very, very difficult then for a science agency or a research agency then fund something that always, every single time it comes in, it looks different, it looks specific. It doesn't look like the kind of science that the people, and you're right, there aren't any social scientists in the community that are making these decisions. And so it looks like a separate, independent project.
Carlo, you wanted to add a brief comment on that?
Well, I want to pick up this business about urgency and time. When Luther was asked what he would do if he knew the world would come to an end tomorrow, his answer was, I'd plant a tree. I think in our case, the tree has been planted and it's our responsibility to nurture it. And what I mean is the following. This has been mentioned briefly, but it should be emphasized. In our community, this IHDP world, some people have worked hard on the concept of a socio-ecological system. That's a small concept, that's a tiny little thing. But we are living in a moment where the idea that the world we live in is governed by a stable equilibrium of a very large number of rational agents is just coming to an end. This metaphor is not working anymore. The challenge is whether we can pick up this tiny little idea of the socio-ecological system with its complex dynamics and apply it to the problems out there. Can we say anything about how to avoid inflation 5 years from now? I don't think so. We better find out how to do this. Can we perhaps inspire policymakers not to believe that we know the truth, but to become a bit more modest in the face of the complexity of the problems by perhaps being a bit more modest ourselves? I do believe that we have something in our community which is really promising, really important in this intellectual transition.
There is one area where you fight for getting R&D money, okay? And there you have, I have to say, simplistic idea about this relationship between science and policy. And you say we need more knowledge, and yes, we need more research, and we need more money, and okay. And that's not interesting, but that happens a lot. But when you really see where this interaction takes place, then there are a lot of interesting things happening. And I would really challenge anyone saying that the policymakers don't aim at the knowledge and don't go where it is and don't find ways. Now, we fund brokerage process at EU level because I challenge people telling me there is an untapped research potential. So I say, okay, then let's tap the potential. Those who pretend there is an untapped, let's identify the research reservoir, tell me what is the policy issue which is unfed or underfed by scientific knowledge, and make this link. There is the money to do this. But then you often find proposals which do a literature review, which do, or give lessons to others how to do it, or things like that. So I think it's easier said than really done, and I would claim that the policy world really go and reach out to scientific knowledge, and the other way around, scientific know how to speak to policymakers.
Well, Jim, I think